the early church, when they met together, I mean, the earliest followers of Jesus Christ, as they met together in the first worship services, a leader would stand up in the midst of the congregation and he would hold his hands up and he would say, "He is risen." And the entire congregation would joyfully shout back, "He is risen indeed." All right, let's try that again. He is risen. A little more joyfully. He is risen. Awesome. Now, to say that Easter was a big deal to the early followers of Jesus is an understatement, because they celebrated it every first day of the week. On Sunday, they would gather together to celebrate the fact that he was risen indeed. I think that in order to understand kind of the magnitude of Easter, you have to go a little further back, because long before there were Easter egg hunts, long before there were nice dresses and pastels, good job today, gals, that were worn, there was a prophecy, a prediction, if you will, about a coming life that would come into the world, and this life would come to communicate and demonstrate what God is like. Now, all of us at different times have really wanted to know what God was like, who he was, and what is he all about? Sometimes in our confusion, we cry out, "God, I don't understand you." And yet, this is a prophecy that there's this person coming, and he was going to communicate and demonstrate what God was like. Now, as Christians, you're probably going, this may be the only amen I get this morning, but as Christians, we believe some of the craziest things, right? Yeah, we do. And sometimes it's mind-boggling, some of the things that we believe. But one of the things that is we actually believe, and it's kind of strange, is that God became one of us. Now, if you grew up in the United States going to church, you would go, yeah, I've heard that before. I get that. But if you stop and think about it, it's kind of mind-boggling. It's kind of a crazy idea. God became one of us. And one of the reasons that we believe this crazy idea is that there are eyewitnesses, people who spent time with Jesus and talked about it and actually wrote about it. And the person who probably explained it the best was a guy by the name of John. We later called him the Apostle John. John was one of those guys who spent a bunch of time with Jesus. I mean, for 3 years, he was with him every single day, every single moment. Every night he was there, listening to Jesus, talking with him, interacting with him. He was one of Jesus' inner circle. And slowly, over this time, he came to believe that Jesus was God in the flesh, that he was the Son of God. And then John saw Jesus crucified. He saw him die. Saw him be put in the tomb. And John said, not sure. Not the Son of God. Son of God doesn't die as a criminal. Then on a Sunday morning, the first Sunday, Easter Sunday morning, John looked into this tomb where he had seen Jesus buried, where he had seen Jesus lay dead, and it was empty. And he walked outside of that tomb and he saw Jesus alive, and it was, yep, he's Son of God. And he couldn't stop himself from telling people about this guy who was dead and then came back to life again. And everywhere John went, he told the story of how Jesus died. He saw him die. He knew that he was dead, and how he came back to life again. He came back from the dead. And every place he told that, everywhere he told people about what happened, about Jesus' death and resurrection, people became followers of Jesus. At that time in the Roman Empire, there was an emperor by the name of Domitian. And Domitian got tired of John telling people about Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. And first he thought he would kill him, but he had noticed when he killed other Christians that 10 more kind of jumped in their place, and he thought, I don't want to multiply him anymore. So he took John and put him on this island off the coast of what's now modern-day Turkey, in between Turkey and Greece, an island called Patmos. And as John was on this island, isolated, John sat down and he thought, I need to write down some of these things about Jesus' life. John, who was one of the eyewitnesses to Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, decided to sit down and he decided to summarize what he had seen. And he says, as he says in one of his letters, what he had heard, what did he experience. This is a photograph of John on the island of Patmos. I'm just kidding. Kind of rocking that Charlton Heston Moses look, isn't he, John, there in that place? But John, as he was isolated on this island, he wrote what we call today the Revelation. He also wrote 3 other letters, 3 small, we call them epistles, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd what? Pretty creative, wasn't he, in naming those things, wasn't he? And then he wrote a bibliography about Jesus called the Gospel, according to John. And in this gospel, in this bibliography of Jesus, he gives kind of a prologue to Jesus' life, and he says some things that are just mind-boggling. This is what John, an eyewitness to the events of Jesus' life, said this. John 1:1. He said, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God," and then he makes this outstanding claim. The Word was God. Wow, that's mind-boggling. That's crazy to believe that God exists in 3 persons, but it's real. He goes down in verse 14, he goes on to say, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. In other words, he moved into our neighborhood. He became one of us. He camped out with us. He did life with us. And we've seen his glory, glory meaning the character of God. We've seen that glory in him, the glory of the one and only. If you grew up reading the King James Version, you would have heard it said, I read it, the only begotten of God means one and only, unique, the one who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. And then he says this in verse 18. Can we go on? He says, no one has ever seen God, no one at all. But the unique one, who is himself God, is near the Father's heart, and he has explained God to us. In other words, the Word, who is Jesus, became flesh, he dwelt among them, and he came to demonstrate, to communicate to us who God was. He showed up, it was God showing up in a bod, and he lived among us, explaining God to us. Now, why would he do that? Why would God become one of us and live as one of us? John says it was to communicate who God was and to demonstrate his character to us. Communicate and demonstrate. Now, no one was expecting for God to show up in a bod, because the essence of every religion was that you had to work your way up to God. But in Christianity, it's different. God becomes flesh. He becomes one of us. What did Jesus do? How did he communicate and demonstrate God while he lived here? I want you to look at a video. The Apostle John tells us that Jesus came to communicate and demonstrate who God is. What kind of strange God enters the world and comes to earth? We're in a setting that was very similar to what Jesus came into. He wasn't born into a hospital or a palace. He instead came to a stable where there was livestock there, maybe some horses or cattle or sheep. But they were right there in the midst of Jesus' birth. Jesus was born in a place like this. Why? Because his parents were on a journey similar to ones that you and I are on. And they had no other options. There was no place, no room in the inn. Jesus was born in a crib, a real crib, a feeding trough. And it was a dirty feeding trough. God's not afraid of dirt. And no matter how dirty I get, God is there in the midst of that dirt. He was born into dirt. He understands whenever I am not what I should be or what he designed me to be. Whenever I get dirty, God understands that and he can handle that. God came in the form of Jesus, searching for me and for you. And he found us. He found us in the midst of the muck and the mire. But since God understands dirt, it didn't bother him at all. So when we think of Easter, we think of new clothes, pristine and pressed, maybe some pastels on the ladies. And most of you, before you came to church today, took a shower. Most of you. And when you leave the building today, you'll go to houses that have been vacuumed and dusted, and on that table that's getting ready to prepare that Easter dinner will be a nice, new, pressed, clean, white tablecloth. And yet, that was not the arena in which Jesus came into. He came to a place that had rough edges, and there was also an odor that's not compatible with many of our Easter dinners. And the reason there's an odor is because there's living things in the stable. And living things create messes. Boy, do they create messes. And those messes oftentimes stink. Jesus was obviously a living creature, and he lived his life among living creatures, more the two-legged variety than the four-legged variety. But these guys that he hung around with, his inner circle, they were kind of a who's who of characters that had messed things up, left messes, left some stinking, smelly messes at times. And you think, here's the Holy One with these guys who are a bunch of screw-ups. They were constantly having issues in their life, just like you and I do. Financial issues, courage issues, trust issues, corruption issues. And yet, he chose these men to be with him, chose normal people who had normal problems. That's why Easter is so important. I'm a living creature, and I create messes. I create dirt. I live in dirt. And that's why the message of Easter is so important to me, is because Jesus came to show how God can handle dirt and help me to handle it. I can create messes anywhere I go. I've hurt people as a result of being the pastor of this church. Sometimes, and most of the time, it's out of my own immaturity that those things have happened. There's not a room in my house that I can't go into and recall some inappropriate word or inappropriate discipline or anger that I've displayed that has hurt another member of our family. Most of the time, my kids can laugh about it now, but that was not the case at the time that it happened. Those memories are painful, and conjuring up those images are not something that I enjoy. No one does. But we all have things that we'd like to remain hidden. Sometimes we hide things away in dark, black places, hidden places. And we say, what happens in Vegas should stay in Vegas, or our parents' basement, or in the back seat of a car, or on spring break trip. All those sorts of things are messes that we create in our life, and they're painful, and they hurt. The great thing about Easter is the guy who came to communicate and demonstrate who God is, he understands those messes, and he handles them very, very well. I guess that's why the Jews called him the Messiah, because he comes in the midst of all of our messes to help us to handle them. Easter is amazing because it's about the God who comes in the midst of our stinking messes, and not only is he able to see them because he was born in one also, and he can handle the dirt and he can handle the messes, but he can also give us the power because of the resurrection for us to handle them in the world that we live in today. That's why I love Easter. It's not just spiritual and transcendent, it's also gritty and messy and bloody. And yet God came, and in the midst of that, he demonstrated how much he cares for us. I hope that this Easter you understand how Easter can be special to you also. My messes, your messes. Every one of us have them. Can I get an amen on that? Reluctantly. And yet, every one of our messes, every time we create a mess, somebody's got to clean it up. Those of you who moms know that best. And God probably knows it better than anybody else. And those messes that you and I make, the cleanup comes with a price tag. Sometimes the price tag is greater than other times. We've all had situations in our life on a small scale that we've messed up and someone has stepped in, paid a fine for us, or helped us out of a situation that really released us from that mess, gave us a new start. The messes that we have created in our life, the Bible calls that sin. And it's what creates this price tag that God, who became one of us, came in the midst of our mess, and he paid the ultimate price, his life, so that you and I could be delivered from that mess. One of my favorite Easter songs is actually a Christmas song. It's a song we love to sing around Christmas. It's O Come, Emmanuel. The name Emmanuel simply means God with us. And Easter demonstrates and communicates to us that God came in the midst of the muck and mire and mess of our life to communicate and demonstrate how much he loves us.
O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God, the Messiah, appears. It's an invitation, really, isn't it? It's a general invitation, a recognition that things are really bad here, and we need you, God. If sung, it's a more specific, a more personal invitation. God, things are a mess here. I got my stuff. I'm in a barn. It stinks. Come, Messiah. James has done this tremendous job of sharing with us just the kind of God that we have that would send his son as this amazing demonstration of how much he loves us. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? We're all captive, aren't we? I mean, some of us may know it and some of us may not, but really we're all captive. If we take very long to think about it, there's something that in my life and something in your life that just holds us down. Something that we've been trying to kick, some pattern, some habit, some addiction, something, some wound, a hurt that's just got us down, and we've been trying to get rid of it for gosh knows how long, or maybe it started this last week and it's going to hold on to us for a while. Come, Emmanuel. You know, here's what I want you to know when you walk away here from here today. I mean, just one thing. One thing. I want you to know. We want you to know that what happened on that Friday afternoon, folks, that what happened on that Sunday morning, that crucifixion, that resurrection, that makes a difference in your Monday. That makes a difference in your Monday. And I just want to be candid with you. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to think that some of you really don't believe that. That you could recite, yes, Jesus died to save me from my sins, but honestly, you have a really hard time understanding that touch point between the crucifixion, what happened there, the resurrection, what happened there, and what's happening, what's holding you captive in your life. Here's the truth. The truth is all of us are hopefully, God willing, we're going to wake up in the morning on a Monday morning and we're going to go about whatever we go about, whether it's a job or school or whatever it is. And some of us are ladder climbers. Some of us are going to wake up in the morning, we're going to have this big ladder in front of us. All right? And that ladder has rungs on it. And those rungs are all the tasks, all the responsibilities, all the things that you feel like you've got to take care of because you have this inward drive that says, I'm really not worth a whole lot. I'm really not worth much to myself or to God unless I can achieve these things. You can't feel good about yourself unless you get these things done in your life. And you're on a never-ending frustrating climb, one rung after another rung, to prove to yourself, to prove to others, to prove to God that you are indeed worthwhile. And that's why you're always searching for a better grade. That's why you're always searching for the next promotion. That's why you're always looking for that neighborhood that you want to live in so badly. It's to prove to yourself, because you really, really can't count yourself worthwhile unless you achieve that next rung on the ladder. But there are other effects. There are other effects, and it is, you don't probably even realize it, maybe you do. But it makes you, when you can't get that next rung, it makes you cranky. You're cranky, aren't you? You're irritable when you can't get to that next rung. You get irritable. You get annoyed when you can't get to that next rung, when you don't get that promotion, when you're not able to buy that car because you didn't get that bonus. You're that person. And your family notices it. And you impose that same ladder climbing principles on your family. Nobody can be quite good enough. There's always something better. If you get a B, it should be an A. You should be better in bed. It's just one thing after another. Good news, ladder lovers. Good news, ladder lovers. What happened on a Friday and what happened on a Sunday makes every difference in your ladder climbing Monday. It does. Look what Paul says to Titus, if you would. At one time, we too were foolish and disobedient and deceived and enslaved by all kinds of passions and pleasures. But when the kindness and love of God our Savior appeared, he saved us. Pay attention to this, ladder lover. Not because of the righteous things we had done, but because of his mercy. You want to believe, if you just do enough, that you will be worthwhile. And I'm saying to you that there's nothing that you can do, whether religious or otherwise, that will ever increase your value in the eyes of God. And there's nothing that you will not do that will ever decrease your value in the eyes of God. It cannot be increased. It cannot be decreased. Someone has said, sometimes we spend our life with a ladder that's up against the wall, and we get to the top and we realize it's up against the wrong wall. But ladder lovers, I'm telling you this morning, there's no wall. There is no ladder to climb. There is no wall. Jesus Christ has done for you everything you need to do. You are worthwhile in his eyes. Well, some of you are not ladder climbers. Some of you are going to wake up in the morning and you're going to have a fishing pole in your hand. And you are going to be casting from the moment you wake up, and you're going to go to bed with that rod and reel in your hand, casting. Casting for what? The big bass? The big carp? No. You're casting for a fish called acceptance. You're casting for compliments. All day long, you're putting out little teasers out there just so people will compliment you. So you'll know that people will like you. Because you can't be happy with yourself unless other people are happy with you. You're fishing, aren't you? You're fishing, and not only are you fishing those compliments, you can't feel good about yourself unless other people like you. And you have a hard time sometimes maybe at home disciplining your children because you want those children to like you and be your best friend. And you spend your days, you'll spend 40 minutes in the morning trying to figure out what to wear because you want to make sure you're pleasing to people. Good news. Good news, fisherman. Good news, caster. What happened on a Friday and what happened on a Sunday makes every difference in your casting Monday. Listen to what Paul says to a people who really didn't even believe that Christ had come in the flesh. He says this: once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your physical behavior, your evil behavior, but now he has reconciled you. He has brought you close to him by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish, free from accusation. If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. Listen, caster. You don't need to cast for compliments. You don't need to cast for acceptance. You don't need to be thinking about who likes you so you can like yourself. Some of us sometimes aren't even good enough with people's love because we have to have them liking us. The God who saved you likes you. The God who saves you wants to be a friend with you, and he made that possible by sending his son Jesus to the cross. You don't have to wake up in the morning and be driven anymore by the fear of acceptance. the God who saves you, he is your friend. Makes every difference on a Monday. Well, some of us don't climb ladders, and some of us don't hold fishing poles. Some of us have been playing this game. I'll call it the Back to the Garden of Eden blame game. And it's older than the game of Monopoly, and I would say, since it had to actually do with the tree, it might have been actually the first board game. Yeah. Some of you are with me in my warped sense of humor. Thank you. It's not climbing the ladder. It's not fishing for acceptance. You're in the Garden of Eden doing what happened in the Garden of Eden since almost day one. You can't stand. You get up on Monday and you can't stand the possible thought of failure. The thought of imperfection drives you over the wall. And so you live with it. You plot out everything so you can be perfect. And you're in this continual blame game. You can never accept responsibility. My goodness. What if I was wrong? So I can't stand that. And so your family and your friends, they are waiting for days upon days with bated breath to hear you say those words, I was wrong. I'm sorry. They won't know what to do. They won't know what to do if they ever hear those words from you. It's almost beyond comprehension that you would actually take responsibility for something that you have done. Everything is blamed on someone else. And your kids, they understand it's their fault. And your spouse, they understand it's their fault. The people at work, it's always their fault. You live with the mantra that begins with the word if. If they had just done their part. If the team had just done what they were supposed to do. If my wife was fill in the blank. Mantra begins with F. Or with if. Good news. Good news, blame gamer. What happened on a Friday and what happened on a Sunday morning makes every difference. Makes every difference to those captive chains that you have around your ankles. That's why Christ died. Listen to what Paul tells a group of people who were filled with blame and shame in their own life. In 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Our desire for perfection, our desire for rightness is delivered not by the things that we try to do. Not by the fact that we're trying to elude failure in some way. Not the fact that we're trying to blame others for every bad thing that goes on. It comes to us because Christ died and his blood makes you and I right. And when God sees us, knowing our wrong, he does not look at us as wrong. He looks at us as righteous, right in his eyes. Ladder climbers, compliment casters, the blame game, but there's one more. Some of us live life looking through a rearview mirror. Now all of us have a rearview mirror in our life, but most of the time our view ahead is larger than that. But some of us live looking all our lives in a rearview mirror. We have something within us that says, someone told me I was stupid long ago, so I must be stupid. I failed that test, so I must be a failure. My spouse rejected me, so I must be worthless. We spend our life looking in that rearview mirror, believing that our past defines us. Believing that regardless of what happens, there is no changing what has happened in the past. That we are bound to it. We are captive, enchained to our past. We cannot change. We're hopeless. We bring that hopelessness, we bring that fear into our family lives and into our friendships, and they are affected by it in so many different ways. Good news. Good news to you. Good news to you with that large rear view window. Here's what Paul says to a people with the largest of large rear view mirrors. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creature has come, the old has gone. The old has gone. On Monday morning, the new has come. You don't have to wake up tomorrow morning with a rear view, looking into that rear view mirror. You can wake up in the morning knowing there's new in your life, that what happened on a Friday and what happened on Sunday makes every difference. Makes every difference on your Monday morning. James has done a tremendous job of just showing us the kind of God that we have. And it's like this fireworks thing. If you've ever been to a fireworks show, there's all kinds of these things. We look and we ooh and ah. But then what is there always at the end? At the end of their finale. And what happened on a Friday afternoon, and what happened on a Sunday morning was this incredible, gorgeous finale. God has been saying, look at me. Look at the kind of God I am through my Son, Jesus Christ. But at the end, he gives his Son, Jesus Christ, as a demonstration of the ultimate act of love. It's a tremendous finale that says, I want you to know without question how much I love you. And that what happens on this Friday afternoon and what will happen on that Sunday makes every difference in your life, in the world. Here at Boulevard, our leadership has kind of created this culture where when we get together, we begin almost every meeting we have on staff meetings, elders meetings, ministry team leaders meetings with what we call wins. And wins are small and large victories that we see happening here, things that support our vision and support our core values. They're important to us. Those wins are vital to us. They're vital for a couple reasons. They're vital because they remind us that we are on track. That what we're doing is making a difference. And they're also important because we know that every day there are battles. That the war has been won, but there are still battles on Monday and on Tuesday. Folks, I want you to know this morning that what happened on Friday, what happened on Sunday, matter on Monday morning. And we're getting ready to close this service out in just a few moments with communion and then some more worship. And let's be reminded, as we participate in communion, that communion is a phenomenally powerful reminder to our hearts and our minds that the battle or the war has been won. Love wins. Love wins. Love has won today.